And welcome back to the webinar here at BINA. So today's topic is jail working? Torah's view on incarceration. Just before we get started, I want to make a very important disclaimer and introduction. Whatever we talk about here today is in theory. We're discussing Torah's view, Torah's perspective on jail, on prison, and it's all in theory, and it's all to give us a certain perspective on life in general, and on this topic in particular. However, obviously that we are living not under Torah rule as a country, we're living under a government, we are obligated to listen to that government. We have a rule called Dina de Malchusa Dina, whatever the law of the land is the law of the land, and therefore, of course, if the law of the land is that somebody needs to go to jail, they should be put in jail. That has no connection to our discussion. We're discussing now, more in theory, Torah's perspective on the concept of incarceration, of locking somebody up behind bars long term as a punishment. So before we actually get into Torah's perspective, just a quick minute on statistics and how much really is jail working. So jail would really carry out two functions. Number one, it should discourage people from reoffending. In other words, if somebody does a crime, whatever the crime is, goes to jail, they go out, they've suffered so much, they would never do it again. However, statistically, that actually doesn't work nearly as much as it should. Of course, I'm sure it works for some people, but it doesn't work for most. In fact, 60% of the people in Australian prisons are reoffenders. If you're talking about somebody who went to prison younger, as a child, the amount of people in prison as reoffenders is actually higher. So prison is definitely not serving that purpose in its fullest extent, not nearly as much as we would like it to. The other function of a prison is, of course, to keep dangerous people off the streets. Now, that actually makes sense if somebody is so ill, so sick, that they actually cannot control themselves and they are in danger to society, they should be locked up. However, after speaking to some people who actually work in prisons and actually work in that field, of course there are people like that, many people like that need to be locked up in order to protect society, and that's common sense. However, it's far less than most people think that actually need to be in prison their entire life in order to protect society. So again, obviously, of course, there are people like that, and there are many people like that, and they should be locked up because society needs to be protected. However, most people in jail do not fall under that category, that it is impossible for them to actually change and to have rehabilitation and to actually go back into society, and society would not be put in danger. Most people do not fit under that category. So, of course, we need to have prisons. It's probably the best thing that we have today, but it is far from working. What is Torah's view on the concept of prison as a punishment? So, before we get to prison specifically, let's discuss punishment in general in Torah view. So, we have a rule. The Mishnah tells us in Maseches Kiddushin, Tractate Kiddushin, Ani nivreisi l'shamish es koini. I was created to serve God. Meaning, we're not just here by chance. Nobody's just born and happens to be here. Every single human being is born with a mission. A specific mission that only he or she can fulfill. And that's the reason why he or she was born. If they weren't needed, they wouldn't be born. The fact that God created that human being means that that human being has a mission to fulfill. And by fulfilling that mission, that person is serving God. That is the way we serve God. We fulfill the mission that we were put down here to do. Together with that mission, we were given the ability to fulfill that mission. We were given the talents, the powers, the capabilities, the things that we're good at in order to fulfill that mission. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean
that when a person is born, automatically they find it easy to fulfill what they need to do. They have the talents, it all goes smoothly. No, actually on the contrary. We have many sources that tell us that actually what a person finds hard to do, that itself is a proof that that is your mission in life. What this means to say is that a person has the ability, if they try hard and they reveal their potential, they bring out, they express their God-given potential, then they will be able to fulfill their mission in its entirety. So together with your mission, you were given the capability, the powers to do so. Where are these powers? That is what we call a soul. The person's soul is the part of us which was given to us in order to fulfill our mission. It's given with powers, with capabilities, with talents, with various things that we need in order to fulfill our mission. That is the way a person is born. What does it mean when a person sins, when a person transgresses, when a person does something wrong? And when I say doing something wrong can either be between us and God, we disobey, we do something that is between us and God, or doing something wrong can mean between us and our fellow man. They're both the same, they're both mitzvot, they're both God's commandments. So what happens when we do something wrong? And we do something wrong, that means that we have now used our soul. We have channeled our talents into negativity. This negative force of evil has now taken over our soul, has now sort of hijacked our talents and our capabilities. And now it is much harder to release them and to use them for positivity, for the sake of serving God, for the sake of spreading goodness in the world, for the sake of fulfilling your mission. So what do you do about that? Well, here comes the concept of punishment. Punishment is not to get back at you. God is not offended when we do something wrong and he feels a need to punish us and to get back at us that we disobeyed him. The whole point of the punishment is actually for the benefit of the sinner. What the punishment does, it inflicts some sort of level of suffering, as we will soon see the various levels of punishment in Torah, on the person, and that suffering cleanses the soul, releases the soul from being hijacked by negative forces, and now the person can now get on with their mission, get on with their life, and actually try again and use their talents and capabilities to fulfill their God-given mission. That is the concept of punishment. The better word is actually atonement. The purpose of punishment is to atone, to cleanse oneself from any negativity that was brought into the soul through transgressing God's will. And now, once we've done that, we've had the punishment, we can now continue to serve God and to fulfill our mission. Now, what are the punishments that are brought in Torah? You can, in general, divide them into three categories. There's what we call mammonis, which means monetary punishment. So, for example, if somebody steals something and need to pay it back. In some cases, they even need to pay back double. In other words, they can be fined even more than what they took. And there are many, many examples of punishments in Torah that one needs to actually lose financially, in other words, go through financial suffering in order to come to proper atonement. Then there's a more severe level of punishment, and that's what's called malchus. Malchus is lashes. For certain sins, which are worse, one needs to have, the number which is given is 39 lashes given by the Jewish court. And of course, the most severe level of punishment is capital punishment. We've done a webinar on that in the past. The concept of someone who's done something so bad that they actually their life has to be taken away from them. Now, before we go on, just a few very important clarifications. Number one, most of these punishments only apply, similar to what we started off with, only apply when we have the Sanhedrin, the High Court in Jerusalem, which is virtually impossible to have today because the High Court needs to have been ordained by someone who has been ordained by by Moshe Rabbeinu. And since that tradition has been cut off, till Mashiach comes, we will not have a Sanhedrin. So these punishments only happen when we are in the land of Israel with a Sanhedrin to give those punishments. Most of those punishments which we've discussed. Going back to the punishment of malchus, of getting whipped, of lashes, one needs to understand that number one, we're dealing with a very righteous court, a court which is not corrupt, not interested in lashing people and whipping people. The point over there is that they are out to bring justice for God. They are God-fearing people, and therefore they wouldn't just give lashes to whoever they wanted to. They would have to go through a whole course with 2 kosher witnesses, 2 proper kosher witnesses, whole process of going through their testimony, taking it apart, seeing if that's actually true, etc., till they actually would give those lashes. What's also very important to understand is actually the number which is given is 39, but actually before a person would get whipped, they would be assessed medically to see how many lashes they can actually handle. So no, the person wouldn't die as a result, and the person wouldn't be severely injured with life-threatening injuries, because they would actually be assessed beforehand to see how many they can handle, and therefore they would only be given, obviously, yes, it would be painful, yes, it would be suffering, and that was the point, that the person should feel bad and repent and come back to God, but it wouldn't be done without any mercy and to the point of death. And of course, the capital punishment, we've discussed this at length in the past, but it was hardly ever given. In fact, the Talmud tells us that if it was given once in 70 years, then the high court was considered to be a court with blood on their hands. It was considered a negative thing. And like we've discussed in the past, statistically, there are many death sentences carried out in the US today than would have been carried out in the land of Israel using that number of once in 70 years. Going back to our topic, putting aside the death penalty for a second, we'll come back to that in a second. The other punishments, the point of it was that a person would go through a brief period of suffering, whether it's financial loss or physical pain, that would help the person repent and feel bad for what they did. The negativity would be cleansed, and after that, the person would go on to have a normal life, a free life, and a life that they were able to fulfill their God-given mission. How about capital punishment? Obviously, after being killed, the person can't get on with their life. Well, that is only given to somebody who has done something so bad that their mission has been revoked. In other words, they've done so much damage that they actually cannot continue to fulfill their mission. The only way that the soul will be cleansed, the only way that the person will reach full atonement is actually to forfeit their life. That is when the death penalty was given. And that will now explain why prison is not mentioned in the Torah, not in the written Torah, not in the oral law, not anywhere as a punishment. It is mentioned, as we'll see on Thursday, in a different context, but it's not mentioned as a punishment. The reason is because the concept of holding someone behind bars for many years, taking a whole chunk out of a person's life, stopping them from being able to fulfill their mission in serving God, that defeats the whole purpose of punishment. The whole purpose of punishment is to cleanse the soul and allow the person to then use their capabilities and talents to serve God, not to limit the person and not allow them to fulfill their mission. In other words, the Torah view is as follows. If a person is able to stay alive, that means that they have a mission to fulfill and we need to allow them to fulfill it. That means they need to be free. Free, not in the sense that they can do whatever they want, because obviously we believe in Torah and Torah is a set of rules, but free in the sense that we're able to fully use what we have in order to bring goodness in the world and do mitzvahs and fulfill God's commandments. Or a person has done something so bad that their life needs to be taken away from them. But to keep somebody alive, which by definition means that they have a mission, and not to allow them to fulfill their mission, that is something that Torah does not believe in. That is something that doesn't make any sense, and it's something which Torah does not believe in. And therefore, the concept of prison is not mentioned in the Torah. To end off with something that might provoke you to think, what would you rather? Would you rather be whipped, but again, as we said before, by a righteous court, people that were not interested in whipping you, did it because they had to. They assessed you before medically to see how much you can handle, so yes, it would be painful. You would suffer for a very short period of time, feel bad, feel remorse, and then get on with your life and do good. Or would you rather be locked up for 30 years, not being able to do anything, cut off from your family, and not being able to fulfill the whole reason while you were created? I'll leave it up to you to decide what is a worse human rights violation. Going in the context of what we just mentioned before,
human rights is the basic right of a human being, is that they are able to fulfill their mission upon this earth. That is what we mean by human rights in this context. Which one violates the person more? Which one stops a person from fulfilling their God-given mission? Obviously, as we started off, prison is the best punishment that we have today because we can't do these punishments today without a Sanhedrin. And of course, we have to follow the law, and someone needs to go to prison should go to prison. But the point of this was to get you to think a little bit and to get you to understand Torah's perspective on what a human being is and what the worth of a human being is. And a human being should always be allowed to fulfill, if possible, to fulfill their God-given mission. On Thursday, we will discuss where prison is yes mentioned in the Torah, and we'll see how it fits with everything that we explained today. Have a great day.